Good evening. Welcome to the Great Heritage Baptist Church. Again, I'm your pastor, Rodney Noblet, welcoming you to our Wednesday night Bible study. We hope to be a help and an encouragement to you. We have a special guest all the way from Northmore High School and from the Gallion Police Department, Tim Duncan. He'll be bringing the message for us tonight. A couple announcements. If you could keep a few people in mind, if you would. Pray for Miss Sandy Buckner again, that she'll kind of come a ways away from where she's been at. Physically, she's been at Ohio State and Columbus there, and trying to find a rehab nursing home facility for her to get closer to around here. Pray, if you would, for Edna Walters' family. Bobby Young, Edna's sister, passed away on Monday. And so if those of you that would be able to go to the viewing, that'd be greatly appreciated for Edna and the family. It's at the Schneider Gump Funeral Home in Gallion. And the viewing is Friday from 9 to 11. And the funeral itself is at 11 there. It's right across from McDonald's there in Gallion. So let's pray for the family, if you would. Several others that have been sick in the church all seem to be improving and doing better. Just keep, again, Edna and her family in prayer. One other special request, if you would pray for Barb Morrison's family. Her daughter, Jo, has been, for quite some time, has had a bout with COPD, and she also passed away on Monday as well. And no details have been given for arrangements as of yet. So pray for Barb and the family, if you would. The rest of our church family, again, we had the church professionally cleaned, spick and span around here. They had some sort of nice machine. They went around and bleached everything, so to speak, some sort of chemicals they put and froze stuff, and got rid of anything that needs to be gotten rid of. So I appreciate them doing that. So the church is coming back again live this Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. And I'm so looking forward to our church family being back together again. I think that's what the Lord wants. That's what we'll have happen here at the church on Sunday, 11 o'clock. So again, I already gave a brief introduction. The one and only Tim Duncan from Gallion Police Department, Northmore High School. And he's going to come and present our Bible study for us this evening. Tim, come on.
Thank you, preacher. All right, before we get started tonight is a little different. Like preacher warned me, it's different speaking to an empty auditorium. But ultimately, it's a privilege. I mean, yes, we got Kurt. Thank you. Good to see you, Kurt and Dwayne and preacher. But it's not the same. But it's still an honor. It's a privilege to be able to stand behind the pulpit and preach God's word. But before we get started, I want to lighten the mood a little bit, considering how COVID's got everybody down. You know, people are sick, and I think we all use a little bit of a clean laugh. I got just a few short, corny jokes. What time of day was Adam created? Just a little before Eve. Who was the fastest runner in the race? Adam. He was first in the human race. Why are Adams Catholic? Because they have Mass. Why didn't they play cards on the ark? Because Noah was always standing on the deck. Why didn't Noah ever go fishing? He only had 2 worms. Did Eve ever have a date with Adam? Nope, just an apple. Why did the unemployed man get excited while reading his Bible? Because he thought he saw a job. And does God love everybody? Yes. But he prefers fruits of the Spirit to religious nuts. So just a few little corny jokes to maybe lighten the mood a little bit. But again, it's a great privilege to be able to stand behind the pulpit and to be able to open God's word and present a message that I believe that's good for everybody, not just myself, but it's something that we can all use, that we can all take to heart. I was supposed to preach this last week, but I got sick, and this one message it never left my mind. You see the title on the back. Attitude is the key to unlocking God's blessings. Before we get started, go ahead and pray, and then we'll dive right into the lesson. Dear Lord, thank you for this evening. Thank you for the privilege, Lord, that you've given me to stand behind the pulpit, Lord, and preach your word. And Lord, you know I don't take it lightly. And Lord, I'm nervous. I pray that you just help calm my spirits, Lord. Give me the words to speak, Lord, and just help me to say everything that you'd have me to say. And I pray, Lord, that none of this, Lord, would be for my glory, but that it would all give you the honor and glory. And pray, Lord, that it'd be used to help somebody. Lord, help us to get our hearts and help us get our minds right, Lord. That way we can go out into the dark world, Lord, and be a light for you. And we just love you. We thank you and praise you again for all that you have done. Just now I pray. Amen. So starting off here, we're going to go through the book of Daniel real fast. I'm not reading verse by verse, but I'm going to break the book of Daniel down into we're going to put a few things that I've noticed when I was reading through the book of Daniel. It starts off here in Daniel chapter 1. All right, we see that the king Nebuchadnezzar, he takes power over Judah and besieges Jerusalem. It says later on down that God takes his people away into captivity. Here in verse 4 says, the children in whom was no blemish, but well-favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and in knowledge, in understanding and science, and such had abilities in them to stand in the king's palace, that they might teach the learning in the tongue of the Chaldeans. So when Nebuchadnezzar took over, he took the children of Judah. When he took over, he pulled out certain Jews, certain people of the children of Israel. He pulled them out, and it says here that they might teach them, that they might teach the learning in the tongue of the Chaldeans. And it says in verse 5, the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat. So we see around the gate right here, when somebody comes into power, what the first thing they do, they attack their educational system. They attack the mind. They attack the way that people think. And we see here that the king uses his food and his wine to help lure or coax God's people into his belief system. Again, that's the danger about education. Is great. Education is wonderful for all of us, for our kids. We send our kids to school, we want them to get smart. But education can be so dangerous because we have to watch at what's being taught to our children. But again, so we see here in 1:8, and it says, but Daniel purposed in his heart. I love that phrase. It said, but Daniel, he started off from the very beginning. Remember, he was free. He was of the children of Judah, and they were taken over by a king. They were forcibly taken over. They didn't vote. They didn't elect Nebuchadnezzar to rule over them. They didn't have a choice in the matter. Nebuchadnezzar was put into power. Nebuchadnezzar was forced upon them. And it says here from the very beginning that Daniel purposed in his heart. He had a purpose from the very beginning. He had his attitude right. He had his mind right from the very beginning. It says here, chapter 1, 13 through 15, Daniel challenges the authority in regards to the eating and the drinking standards of the wine. So we see down here, Daniel says here in verse 15, let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, that thou seest deal with it. Thou seest deal with thy servants. So he consented unto them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in the flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. So from the very beginning, they're bombarded. They were taken over by government. They were taken over by somebody, all right, that was going to suppress and that was going to oppress them. From the very beginning, the king tried to change what they were being taught, try and teach them the ways of the Chaldean, try and get them to eat of the things that the king was eating, to drink of his wine. We have standards as Christians. We have to stand by our biblical standards. And we know about eating and drinking. We know what is good for us and what's not good for us. Jewish standards, they had different customs. They couldn't eat pork. They couldn't eat anything unclean. They had standards that God put for the children of Israel to follow by. But that's not what the king was offering them to eat. He said, you're under my rule. You're going to eat what I tell you to eat. You're going to drink what I tell you to drink. And that's what you have to do. But we've seen here from the very beginning, Daniel purposed in his heart. He said, we're not going to defile ourselves with the king's meat. We're not going to take of the king's wine. All right? And then later on it says, and as for these poor children of God, God gave them knowledge and skill and all learning and wisdom. So we see that Daniel from the very start gets his mind right. He says, we're not in a favorable situation. This isn't good for us. This isn't something that we want to happen. This isn't something that makes us happy, but we're here in this situation anyways. So regardless what happens, regardless of who takes office, regardless of what happens in the political realm, God's in control from the very beginning. It's our attitude. It's our attitude that we have going into this that is going to determine whether or not God can even bless our nation. So again, we see starting off that God has given Daniel, later Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he's given them special talents. God gives us all talents and abilities. We must be willing to use them for God. We see over here in chapter 2, starting off, it's talking about the king's forgotten dream. So move on. So in Daniel chapter 1, king takes over. Children of Judah, they're pulled out of Jerusalem, and they're taken into a foreign land under an oppressive rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. All right, so Daniel challenges them. Daniel says, stand firm, have a right attitude. Not one time when you read the book of Daniel is he disrespectful to his authority. Not one time does Daniel stand up and try to lead a revolt against the authority. Not one time do you see that in the book of Daniel. Throughout a common theme, Daniel is always respectful. The children of Judah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're always respectful of the person put in power. And we're going to see that later on. But here in chapter 2, the king has a dream. He's forgotten the dream. And what he wants, we can see from the very outset, it says here in verse 2, Then the king commanded to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dream. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. This put the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. And the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me, and if you will not make it known unto me the dream, with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut into pieces, and your house shall be made a dunghill. So the king, he had a dream, he forgot it, but he called the wise men, the people of the world, the professors, the law students, the people who had education in the Chaldeans. Remember when he took the children of Judah, when he took them into captivity, first thing he wanted to do was to re-doctrinate, re-educate them in the way of the Chaldeans. But we see here in chapter 2, from the very outset, when he has a dream, the first thing that he calls the educated. Nothing wrong with education. Depends on what kind of education we're talking about. All right. Wisdom is biblical application of knowledge. That's what wisdom is. But you see from the very beginning, the king is trying to change their educational system, how they think. And when he has a question, first thing he does, he calls for the professors. He calls for the intellects. He calls for the people who have maybe a more open, a more liberal mindset. He calls them in, and they can't give him the answer that he needs. They can't give the answer he wants. They don't know. So what happens? Later on, we see down, remember that Daniel, here in 23, Daniel gave thanks to God for the gifts that God had given him. Daniel 2:23, Daniel said, I thank thee, and praise thee, O God of my fathers. All right, thou hast given me wisdom and might, and thou hast made known unto me now what we desire of thee, for thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. So Daniel hears about what's going on. Daniel hears that the king has had a dream that he can't remember, and the king is wroth. The king desires to know this dream, but God, who has given Daniel wisdom and knowledge. Again, wisdom is just biblical application of knowledge. So God has given Daniel these special gifts that he's given us all. We all have a certain gift. Some of us can get up and preach or teach behind a pulpit. Some people can get up and teach in front of a class. Some people, all they can do is clean the church. It doesn't matter. God's given us all a different gift. Some of us are outgoing. Some of us are not. But God has given us all a special ability. Some of us have the ability to run lights and sound and technology and have that understanding. Some don't. But it doesn't matter. God has given each and every one of us, every single one of us has a special gift that God's given us. But from the very beginning, we need to be like, Dan, we need purpose in our heart. We have a mindset. We need to have a positive attitude. Don't think, oh my gosh, because I can do this, the church is going to call me on to do this. They're going to expect me to go and do this. They're going to want me to do this now. That shouldn't be our mindset. Our mindset should be, thank God I can do that. Hey, I can be used in that area. It's our mindset. Hey, I'll gladly volunteer. Hey, I don't know how to, but I'm willing to learn. That's how our mindset has to be. It's all attitude. And we see again, Daniel gave thanks to God. He said, I thank thee and praise thee, O God of my fathers. Thou hast given me wisdom and might. So we see later on down here, and God just throw this in here in verse 25 in chapter 2. Then Arioch brought Daniel in before the king in haste and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captive of Judah. Just throwing out there again. Daniel is not in a free society. America, we are. We are free. We get so upset about what happens over things that we cannot change. We take in the negativity from our news media. We take it in and we dwell on it. And I'm just as bad as anybody else. I've got to a point we got to turn it off. We got to turn it off. We laugh at the people, and we get mad at these people who went back in 16 when they lost the election. They were crying, they were screaming, being crazy. We laughed at them because they look crazy. And now 4 years later, we don't get the outset that we want, but we're going to do the same. Again, from the very beginning, God was in control. God knew what he was doing when he took the children of Judah into captivity again. He knew what he was doing from the beginning. So for us to have a poor attitude, for us to be always griping and complaining and whining and just bickering, it's not going to solve anything. What's it do? The outside world looks at the Christians and they see it just murmuring, backbiting, complaining. We don't look any different than they did 4 years ago. It's our attitude. And again, just got the little reminder, I have found a man of the captivity of Judah. God just throws it in. Remind them, Daniel's a captive. He's not free. Daniel can't just go off and do what he wants. He doesn't have the freedoms that we do today. America's still free. Thank God America's still free. But so we see here in chapter 2, Daniel explains this dream to the king. Daniel here in chapter 2, verse 37, it said, O king, thou art king of kings, for the God of heaven has given thee a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. I put right next to this, God is in control. Daniel comes before the king, and what does he do? He's not coming before the king and griping or backbiting or I didn't vote for you. I didn't want you. I don't want you to rule over me. Or he didn't come in, oh King Nebuchadnezzar and worship. He never did that. From the very outset, Daniel has respect for his authority. He comes out with respect. Thou, O king, art a lowercase king of kings. For the God, capital G, for God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom. The same God of heaven has given him power. The same God of heaven has given that king strength. And the same God of heaven has given him glory. God put Nebuchadnezzar there for a reason. And we see later on down here in verse 47, and the king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is capital G, God is a God of gods, and capital L, Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets. Daniel had explained to the king the dream that he had forgotten. And the king knew that because Daniel was able to do that the only person that could give Daniel that wisdom was the capital G, God, Lord Jehovah, Jesus. We know that God gave Daniel that wisdom, that knowledge, and the king recognized that. All right, again, the king said to Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your capital G God is a capital G God of all gods. So Jesus, he's God of all. And it says, and a capital L, Lord of kings and revealer of the secrets. And thou couldst reveal this secret. And the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many gifts and made him a ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governors and over all the wise men of Babylon. So Daniel had a gift that God has given him. And Daniel said from the very outset, he purposed in his heart he was going to have the right attitude. He never came before the king with a haughty spirit. He never came before the king with a lackluster, a demeaning spirit, like he was being oppressed. He was, but he didn't have the mindset of being an oppressed Christian. That's not what Daniel did. He came with the proper attitude. And what happened? God blessed him. It says here that again, the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the princes of Babylon and the chiefs and the governors and all the wise men of Babylon. So when Daniel stood up for right, when Daniel followed God's plan, when Daniel accepted what God had given to him, what God had put him into, the situation, when Daniel accepted that allowed Daniel to thrive and to flourish. And we see that God put Daniel over top. God elevated Daniel above those that he was supposed to be formed after. Remember back in chapter 1 where they tried to re-indoctrinate them in the way of the Chaldeans and the philosophies and the mindsets. But we see that when Daniel stayed faithful to God with the gifts that God had given him, God elevated him above those people. And it said here in the very end, it said, then Daniel requested of the king that he said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of their province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. God put Daniel in a position of power because God knew Daniel had the right attitude. Daniel had the right mindset. God knew that he could trust Daniel in that position. Again, God put Nebuchadnezzar into power for a reason. God will put whoever in the White House that he wants. God has a reason for it. It is up to us not to bicker and complain and gripe about it. It is our job to pray for our leaders that he has in power. Do we like one over the other? Yes. Do we believe that one is better for Christianity and the nation of Israel than the other? Yes. We did our part in a democratic society. We went out and we placed our votes. We gave our voice. Regardless of what happens after that, God is in control. God is putting whoever he wants into that position. we have done our part. So now it's time for us to stop bickering and complaining and whining. It's time for us to get onto our knees and start praying for the person that God puts into power. So we see here, going over in chapter 3. Here in chapter 3, an unknown amount of time passes. All right, it doesn't say a year, it doesn't say 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But the same king is in power. Nebuchadnezzar is still on the throne. God still has Nebuchadnezzar in the position of authority. But we've already seen that God has elevated Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to positions of power right there along with Daniel. Why? Because of their mindset, because their attitude was right from the very beginning. So they're still in a position of power. Now some time has passed here in chapter 3. It's a chapter with the golden image. Nebuchadnezzar resurrects an image. He commands all the people to get down when you hear the sackbut, psaltery, harp, all the music. Get down on your face, worship the image. We know that's here in chapter 3. We know the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They said no. Again, remember, these are people that were put into power by being faithful to God. They used the ability that God gave them. They used it for God's glory. God elevated them to positions of power. All right, it talks about how he set them as, here in chapter 2, back in chapter 2, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, over the affairs of the province of Babylon. So these 3 Hebrew boys are in elevated positions of power. They have some standing, they have some clout, they have some backing behind them in the realm of government. But we see here, even though they have something to lose now, they're not the slave. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're not the whipping boys. They're not down there pulling the stones, building the tabernacles, building the statues and the stadiums and the Colosseum. They're not doing that. They're not digging in the dirt. They're not burrowing homes. They're not in the field working. These are men of God who were faithful to God despite their circumstances. They got put into a position of power. Now they have something to lose. Now they have somewhere they can fall. But we see here that an image is erected, and the king has made a decree. It says, therefore, at time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all the kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and all the languages fell down and worship the golden image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. But we see that the 3 Hebrew boys, word got back to the king. King, there's 3 Hebrew boys that you'd put into power. When we heard the music, we heard the sword, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery. We heard it, but you have 3 people in power that aren't bound to your image, O king. And we see later on over here. Sorry, and it said, and there were certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They have not served like gods, nor worshipped the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought them, these men, before the king. So the king is angry. The king has heard that his 3 people in political power have turned their backs on him. They have not obeyed the rule of the land that he has put into power. He has passed a law. He has passed a decree. When you hear the music, you're to worship my image. And these 3 Hebrew boys, the people are in power, said, it doesn't matter what you decree. It's not right with God. We're not going to bow down to a graven image. We're not going to worship this image. That's not what God has for us to do. They took a stand. We can take a stand. Yes, as Christians, whoever gets off, they can, there's certain things that they can maybe try to limit our speech, or there's certain things they can try to do to help suppress or oppress the Christians. There's certain things that people in power will try to do. But we're not being faced with a firing furnace. Here in America, we don't have to worry about our lives being put on the line because we have a preacher that will stand behind the pulpit and preach God's word. We can still bring a King James Bible to church. We still have the freedom to go to church. We're talking about in a land where if you don't bow before this image, you will be killed. We're not there in America. I don't believe that we'll ever get to that. I don't believe as America in itself will ever get to that point because of the Constitution and the things that our founding fathers have used to build this country based upon the Word of God. I don't think we'll get to that point. I think America will be long gone before that time comes. But that's for another day. That's a whole different story. And it says here in verse 14, chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do you not serve my, lowercase g, gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if you be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if you worship not, you shall be cast into the same hour to the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God, in our Bible is capital G, that shall deliver you out of my hand? Did the king just forget earlier in chapter 2 about the same God that was able to interpret a dream that he had dreamed and forgotten? He'd already forgotten that these people, the children of Judah, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel, they serve a God that could interpret a dream that the king had and had forgotten and given the interpretation. He'd forgotten about that already. Again, we don't know how much time has passed. And earlier in chapter 2, the king said, No, of a truth, your God is God, is a God of gods, and the Lord of kings, and the revealer of secrets. King Nebuchadnezzar already said that. And then sometime later, he gets to the point here in chapter 3, who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Is he going a little crazy? Is he going a little senile? Did he not just forget the God that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego served? Did he already forget about this in the past? It's the same God as in chapter 2, verse 47. Here in verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O Nebuchadnezzar. Now this is for the Christians. It says, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. As Christians, we have things that we have to stand on. There are some things that we will not compromise on. All right, right now, we have remote services due to COVID. We understand that. We understand for public safety of everybody else and for the general well-being, for the health of our congregation. We understand. You know, we've gone to live services, which has been a great blessing. And for myself and my family, when we are sick, we can get on our phone, on a computer, and we can still be in church. We're not compromising on the word of God by having remote services. But we have to be bold on certain things. We're not going to get rid of our King James Bible because it offends somebody. We're not going to step down when it comes to our stance on abortion because it offends somebody. Because we're talking about human life. All right, we're not going to stand down when talking about witnessing and soul winning, about the Bible, telling others about Jesus. We're not going to stand down on that because there are certain things in the foundation of Christianity that God has put into place. It's like the spine of Christianity. There are certain things that we can't compromise on. And right here, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I wrote right here, it said, be bold. It said, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. It said, King, there are some things that we'll go along with, but there's some point where we have to draw the line. This is where we draw the line, King. We've done this, and this, and this for you. but we will not bow ourselves down to your image. We will not do this. All right, so right next I said, be bold. Verse 17, if it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. They're not being disrespectful. They're not standing before the king with a proud, puffed up heart and say, King, we are going to defy you. They're not saying that. I put next to that, be faithful. When we are challenged, or when we are being told that we can't do certain things in the Roman Christian, if they come in and say you can no longer preach from the King James Bible, no offense to the authority, we can't not teach from the King James Bible. If they were come and say you guys can no longer go knocking on doors, you can no longer witness to people, tell people about Christ, I'm sorry, no disrespect, but we can't fall in line with that. If they were to come and say you are no longer allowed to preach on certain topics as far as homosexuality, or as far as abortion, as far as even government, or creation, or secularism, if they come and say that, we're not going to be disrespectful. It's our attitude. But we're going to draw the line. Here in verse 18, the backbone these children had. It says, but if not. If God doesn't deliver us, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, we will not serve thy lowercase g gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. They set the line. They said, right here's the line. Our God will deliver us. But if he doesn't, we've drawn the line in the sand. We're not stepping over. And it says that Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The king blew his top. The king got angry. He felt like he was being defiled. He felt like he was being disrespected. And the Bible says that he ordered them to turn the furnace up 7 times hotter than what had been before. So now he's going to start flexing his muscle. The king, I am government. I tell you to do this. You obey. You don't obey. You're going to that fire. Oh, hey, the fire, make it 7 times hotter. The king tried to flex his muscle. He tried to assert his power over Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Again, that's not in America today either. So again, we're looking at a very extreme case of government and power and oppression. And yet these people, with the right attitude, the right mindset, with the right purpose in their heart from the very beginning, not to be disrespectful, but to respect the person that God had put in power. Let's not forget, God put Nebuchadnezzar in power. God still gave Nebuchadnezzar the power and the strength and the kingdom that he had. God still put him there for a reason. Maybe it was for these Hebrew boys. So that one day, back in America, back in 2020, down the road in 2020, some nobody can stand behind the pulpit and preach a little message about attitude and about maybe we should be thankful for what we do have and not complain about what we don't have. And we know the rest of the story. The 3 Hebrew boys are thrown into the fiery furnace. The king's angry. He's wroth. They've defiled me. They're not going to listen to me. We're going to throw them in the furnace. He throws them in the furnace. And then we see in verse 24, and then the king Nebuchadnezzar, the king was astonished and rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, did we not throw 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they said unto him, they said unto the king, true, O king. And he answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. So again, Nebuchadnezzar comes into reality with God again. The same God that interpreted his dream that he had forgotten about, and none of the wise men in the land, none of the educated, none of the philosophers, none of the liberals, the worldly mindset, none of them could figure out his dream. But here comes somebody who's serving God, who's somebody who has a mind focused on God, who has the right attitude towards God, who has respect for the people in position of power, and understand that God has put the people in the position of power. We see that Nebuchadnezzar had come face to face with God in that instance. Then he had forgotten about it. He resurrected an image, and he gets the audacity to stand up and say, "Who is that guy that can deliver you out of my hand?" And now he's face to face again with the fourth person in the fire, and he says, "The fourth is like the Son of God." And here down in verse 20, then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, "Blessed be God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, that they have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any lowercase g God except their own capital G God." So again, Nebuchadnezzar comes face to face with God again. Then we get here into chapter 4. The king has another dream. And down here in verse, we're going to skip a majority. Down here in verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was astonished for the 1 hour. His thoughts troubled him. And the king spake and said unto Belshazzar, "Let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee." Belshazzar answered and said, "My lord." So again, Daniel was brought again before the king again because the king had a dream. He doesn't know the interpretation. But we've seen earlier again, he calls here in verse 5, chapter 4, verse 5, it says, "I saw a dream which made me afraid, and thoughts upon my bed, and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore I made a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. And came in the magicians and the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers, and I told the dream before them, and they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof." So again, Nebuchadnezzar has another dream. What does he do? He calls the world in again. The same people who couldn't help him in chapter 1, the same people that couldn't help him in chapter 2, the same people that couldn't help him in chapter 3, he calls them for their wisdom, and they cannot provide him the wisdom that he needs. But there's Daniel, aka Belshazzar, the name the king did in Belshazzar. And he says, then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour. His thoughts troubled him, and the king spake and said, "Belshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee." Belshazzar answered and said, "My lord." Again, Daniel has respect for the people in power. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't a good king. We're not talking about somebody who gave the children of Israel the freedoms and the rights that they wanted. We're talking about a king who was oppressive. We're talking about a king who would murder people for not worshiping his image. Earlier, the king was so wroth about the dream that he couldn't remember that he was going to kill all the wise people because no one could tell him his dream. He was a murderous, he was a ruthless dictator. But Daniel has respect. Daniel didn't ask to be put in this position. But Daniel took the gifts that God gave him. Daniel had the right mindset. Again, I'm not going to be disrespectful to my authority. I don't like it. I don't like the position I'm stuck in, but I'm going to make do with it. I'm going to do what God has given me to do. And God has put them into positions of power. God has elevated them. God has made them great into Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. They're not pushing the grinding mill. They're not working in the fields. God's blessed them for the little talents that God has given them. Daniel is still respectful. He says, "My Lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies." This wasn't going to be Nebuchadnezzar's favorite dream. This isn't a dream that the king was going to be excited or wanting to hear. The king was getting ready to hear that his power is coming to an end. The king is getting ready to find out my time on the throne is coming to a very quick and a very short end. So this isn't something that Daniel was excited to tell the king, somebody who has already made it known that he will kill other people who defy him. And now the king's getting ready to learn that he's going to lose his position of power. Over here in verse 25, it said, "Then they that drive thee from men and that dwell shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of the heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee till thou hast known the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and will give it to whomever he will." So Daniel is telling the king, you are going to be thrown out of your kingdom. You are going to be out in the field with the oxen. You're going to be eating the grass, and you are going to be, the water on your back is going to be from the dew that God has sent from the heaven above. You are going to lose it all. You are going to be cast out. Daniel's telling the king he's getting ready to be dethroned, and he's going to be out with the cattle. Why? Till thou knowest, it says here, till thou knowest that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and will give it to whomever he will. Daniel's saying God's getting ready to take you out of power. You don't have a choice in the matter, king. You don't have a choice in this matter. You're getting ready to lose it. You're getting ready to lose it all. You're going to be out with the oxen. You're going to have the dew on your back in the morning. Daniel says again 2 times, actually. You see that one here at the end of verse 25. Thou wilt know the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and give it to whomever he will. God puts people in power. God takes people out of power. That's God's thing. That's not our thing. That's God's thing. Here, verse 32 again. Until thou knowest that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whoever he will. Daniel said it 2 times to the king. God put you in power. God's going to take you out of power. Here says verse 34. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar speaking. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and my understanding returned unto me. Now bless the Most High. Now praise and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion and kingdom, and from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and doeth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay in his hand, or say unto him, what doest thou? Here at the end of verse 37 in chapter 4. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways, judgments, those that walk in pride, he is able to abase. Nebuchadnezzar got thrown out of his kingdom. He came to a humbling reality. Did we not forget earlier, thing in chapter 3, when he said, who is that God that can deliver you out of my hand? Did we not forget? At one point, he extolled himself to the point where he said, who is your God that can deliver you from me? I'm the king. I'm going to turn that furnace up 7 times hotter. Who is that God that can save you from me? A couple chapters later, Nebuchadnezzar, his eyes are opened. Those that walk in pride, he is able to abase. Chapter 5. We're almost done. Chapter 5. Nebuchadnezzar, his son, comes to power. All right. So here comes Belshazzar. King made a great feast to thousands of his lords and drank wine before thousands. So Nebuchadnezzar, he loses his power. He loses his throne. His son dethrones him. Now his son's on the throne. Let's not forget his son was around when these miracles, when Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were serving God and serving his dad and interpreting dreams and being delivered from a fiery furnace. His son watched this. His son was in the palace. His son had some knowledge of what's going on. But his son knows better than daddy. His son's more woke than daddy. His son knows what the people want. People don't want this old time religion. People don't want, solid gospel preaching. People don't want to hear how they're sinned, they're lost, they're dying, going to the devil's hell, and that the only way to heaven is Jesus Christ. People don't want to hear that no more. That's not woke. That doesn't make everybody feel good about themselves. Here comes Belshazzar. He's going to come to the throne. What's he do? He takes of the cups that came from the temple from Jerusalem, the holy thing, the things that were used and services to God. In the Holy of Holies, he takes these sacred articles that came from the temple and he defiles them with the king's wine. Everybody's drinking, getting drunk, and having a good old party, enjoying it up. Christianity 2020. Do what you want, come as you want, leave as you came. It doesn't matter. We're all going to heaven. Jesus loves everybody. Standards don't matter. Here, Belshazzar, he's here at the party. But doesn't he know that his party is going to come to an abrupt end when there's a little writing starts right on that wall? And they're terrified. It talks about here in verse 6, then the king's countenance was changed and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loose and his knees smote against one another. He's scared out of his mind. He's partying. He's defiling God. He's making a mockery of Christianity. He's doing what everybody wants. We're all here just to have a good time. We only live once. YOLO, you live once. Live it up, and whatever happens, happens. Until God comes and crashes the party. God comes in and writes on the wall how his kingdom is getting ready to fall that night. He doesn't know what it means. But do you know what he does? And again, the king cried along, bring the astrologers. We've heard this before, haven't we? Bring the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers. And the king spake and said unto the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have chains of gold about his neck, and it shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. I will give you power, whatever you want. Just tell me what is on the wall. Doesn't he sound like his dad? From chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. He sounds just like his daddy. He hasn't learned anything. He's a little thick. He's a little hard in the head. He hasn't learned from his dad's mistakes. What do you do? Call the world in. Tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what's going on. Tell me the problem. Tell me, please. The world doesn't have the answer. God has the answer. You know what they do? Here comes Daniel. And it says here, back here in chapter 5, verse 11, and there was a man in the kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and the day of the Father light and understanding and wisdom, like wisdom of gods, and was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians and the astrologers and Chaldean sorcerers, forasmuch as an excellent spirit and knowledge and an understanding, interpreting of dreams. I like this, what they said about Daniel. Forasmuch as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding. Daniel never got puffed up when he was in a position of power. He never got too big for his shoes. He knew God had put him in that position. Daniel had the understanding God puts people in power. God takes people out of power. He knew that God could quickly drop him down on the pedestal just as quickly as God raised him up. And it said Daniel had an excellent spirit. Attitude, people. Attitude. Had an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding. Then was Daniel, here in verse 13, then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah? Hey, just out there again. Hey, Daniel, I know you have a position of power, but you're still in captivity. Don't think that you're on your high horse just because you have a position of power in my kingdom because my dad put you there. Don't think that because you have some clout that you can do whatever you want. You're still captive. You're still in captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry. We go through the verse, and it says here in verse 20, but when his heart was lifted up, his mind hardened in pride, and he was disposed from his kingly throne. Daniel told him, King, you're going to fall tonight to the Medes and Persians. They're coming, they're going to take over. You're going to lose your throne tonight. What happened to the king? But when his heart was lifted up, his mind hardened in pride, and he was disposed from his kingly throne. How quickly he was living it up on his daddy's dollar, on his daddy's dime, the work that his daddy put in. Dethrones his dad, takes over the kingdom. Oh, how quickly. When we get high on ourselves, when we think that we know better than everybody else, when we think that our way is the only way, our way is the right way, you can't tell us otherwise. That's why I hate talking politics to people. Most people do not want to have a debate. They want to have an argument. This is what I think. If you don't agree, then shut up. That's how most people are, and I can't stand talking to those kind of people. Nobody wants to have an intellectual conversation. Nobody wants to hear some facts. Give me some of your facts. Let's talk about it. Let's have an intellectual conversation. Nobody wants to do that anymore. It's this is what I believe. If you don't believe it, then you're wrong. This is how I feel. If you don't feel how I feel, then your feelings are wrong and my feelings are right. That's how people are anymore. Can't stand it. Can't stand it for the life of me. But we see right here, young king dethrones daddy, does what he wants. And oh, how quickly. Did he not learn from his dad? He that walketh in pride, he is able to abase. Did he not forget that his dad was once big dog? His dad was once on the throne, but now dad's out in the field with the cattle, eating the grass, and waking up every morning wet from the dew. Did he not forget about that? Yes, he did. And it says here in verse 22, and thou his son, O Belshazzar, thou hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. Daniel says, Belshazzar, we've been here before. You have been here before. You watched your dad's kingdom in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and chapter 4. You've watched the God of Judah. You've watched him move. You've watched him put your dad into power. You've watched how your dad has oppressed the children of Israel, how the children of God stand up for God, how they had the right mind, how they had the right attitude, they had the right mindset. They used their skills for God, and God has blessed them. God has blessed your father. And you see how God has cursed your father because of his unbelief and his defiance towards the God of Judah. He says, thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart. Thou knewest all this. You've seen it before, but you haven't learned your lesson. I wrote next to it, it says, stay humble. Stay humble and stay bold. Then later on, it talks about this is the writing that was written, and Daniel was breaking down what the writing saying. Daniel was getting ready to tell him, you're going to lose the kingdom, you're going to lose it all, it's going to fall tonight, the Medes and Persians are going to come in, they're going to take over, you're going to be gone. And it passes. And in verse 31, and Darius the Medes took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So about 62-year-old king comes in, takes over, young bucks out of the throne again. Already. So now we have another king. This is the last chapter, and we'll be done. Here in chapter 6. And it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, that he should be over the whole kingdom, and over these three presidents, of whom Daniel was first. And that the princes might have accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. And Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him. It all again comes back to that big A word, and that is our attitude. Is how we conduct ourselves when we are oppressed and when things don't go our way. It is our attitude that determines how we come out on top. If we go into this fight with a negative mindset, oh, woe is me, things aren't going right, this is rigged, this ain't fair, life ain't fair, boo-hoo-hoo. When we come out with that mindset, God can't use us. God can't use us to do his will when we have the poor woe is me on our backs. And I'm just as bad as anybody else. This is hard for me. I have to tell myself when I go into work, I don't want to be like everybody else. There are a lot of people. I work with some fantastic people at Guy and Peter. I work with some fantastic people. But I want to be different. I want to, at the end of my tenure, at the end of my career, I want to be sad when I retire. I want to be sad because, man, it's been a great 25, 30 years serving my community. Man, I'm going to hate leaving. It's going to be sad the day I retire. I want to be sad that I'm leaving my job. I don't want to be happy and thank goodness I'm out of here and see you all later. I don't want that. It's our attitude. It's our mindset. How do we go in? How do we live our lives? That's going to determine how we can be used by God. We're going to hurry through this. And Daniel preferred by the presence. And sorry. And it says here, and the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful. Neither was there any error or fault found in him. So there were people that were jealous of Daniel because Daniel was humble, because Daniel served God. God gave Daniel abilities and talents, and he used them for the glory of God, and God elevated him, and people were jealous. It's like a bunch of crabs. When one crab tries to get out, what the other crabs in the pot do? They grab and try to pull him down. We should never be that way as Christians. When we see somebody do something good, we should be cheering them. We should be pushing them. We should be trying to elevate them. We should be, oh, well, I didn't get noticed for cleaning the church. I didn't get noticed for running the sound in the back. No one gave me a pat on the back. Nobody asked me to get up and preach a message. Well, good for them. And whether they go around and start backbiting. Christians, we can be like a bunch of crabs sometimes. I swear, we can be like a bunch of crabs. What we need to do, we need to be elevating everybody. We need to be helping each other, pushing us to do more. Hey, good job on that. You did fantastic. Hey, those bus routes, Brother Ken, those went up. Man, I love the spirit. I love that you wanted to go out and pick up these kids. I love that. Good job, Kurt, Sally, Tammy, Pete, Josh, everybody who puts work into these areas. Hey, Dwayne, back in the sound, you have done fantastic. You've done a great job in helping and finding a need and getting involved. We need to be encouraging. Hey, good job. Keep up the good work. Preacher, way to keep preaching. Thank you. I know that every time it's service time, I can get on my phone. I can log in. I can watch Heritage Baptist Church online, even though I can't make it because I'm working or because I'm sick. But hey, thank you, preacher. Thank you for getting behind the pulpit and preaching the word every single time. You keep it up. You keep firing. That's how we need to be. We need to be encouraging one another. Hey, so-and-so sick. So-and-so needs help. Hey, I can't do much, but I can help them. That's what we need to be as Christians. We need to be in this together. We need not to be complaining and backbiting because we're not getting the recognition that we think we deserve. We need to be helping each other. We need to be pushing each other forward to help us do more for God. When we get together, we can get a whole lot more done. It would take one person forever to clean this entire church by themselves. I'm not saying that we've had people come and do it. I understand. But I'm saying as far as time and ease, I think we could just use that as an illustration. Say this church was ransacked, it was trash, it was filthy. It would take one person a lot longer to this whole building get cleaned up than if we had 15 or 20 people working together. we get things done so much quicker. And we might even get them done so much better because now everybody can focus on areas. Hey, I got the chair. Hey, I got the books. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and get the cords wrapped. Hey, I'm going to go take care of the bathroom. Hey, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to go sweep up the gym. And someone said, oh, hey, I'm going to go fix up the kitchen. And someone said, hey, I'm going to take out the trash. When everybody works together, we can get so much more done and so much quicker. And we can do such better quality of work as Christians for God when we work together. But that's not what these presidents were doing. Daniel was faithful. God put Daniel in a position of power and authority because God knew he could trust Daniel. And these men, they got jealous. And they say, King, you need to pass a decree that anybody who worships any other god but you, they'll be thrown into the lion's den. They came before the king, they buttered him. Hey, king, you're doing such a good job with this kingdom. Man, no one runs a kingdom like you. Man, you know why it is? It's because of you. How dare somebody serve another god? You're running the castle. You're head honcho. You're in control. Nobody should be serving any other god but you. Get the king all puffed up. Yeah, I am doing a good job, ain't I? This is a pretty good kingdom. Yeah, he puts his stamp of approval on that piece of legislation. Legislation is passed. You can't serve anybody but the king. But here in verse 10, chapter 6, verse 10, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber towards Jerusalem, and he kneeled on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before capital G God, as he did aforetime. The presidents, they were spying on him. There's Daniel. He's praying to God. Daniel has broken the decree. Daniel has broken the law. We are going to tell the king Daniel has sinned. Daniel has broken the law. Now Daniel has to be put to death. Verse 14, then the king, when he had heard these words, was sore displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. King, like, it's too late. I've signed the decree. I have to abide by my own law. The king wasn't happy. He wasn't happy about having to throw one of his chief presidents, somebody he highly respected and admired because he had taken his stand for God. Now he had to punish him. He didn't have a choice. Now he had to punish him. But here in verse 16, the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, that God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. The world will gain an amount of respect for you when you stand up for God. I'm not talking about being a wishy-washy Christian. There are people that I know, they say one thing, and when things get hot, they turn around and run and go the other way. They're very wishy-washy. Oh, praise God when things are great. Oh, woe is me when things are bad. We all know people like that. People have more respect when they know that you're about it. When they know that you're about serving God, being a real Christian, people have more respect for you. When your feet are put to the fire, and it's like, whew, a little warm, but hey, I'll be all right. People have a little more respect for you. But we see, now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver the king. So Daniel, I got to put you in the lion's den, but I know your God has proven it time and time again that your God will deliver you. Here, verse 21, the Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. This is the next morning. The king comes back. The king comes back the next morning because the king couldn't sleep. He's troubled. Oh my gosh, I've thrown Daniel into the lion's den. Daniel is one of my most trusted presidents. Daniel, he's one of my faithful. He's one of my great men. I need Daniel. I'm worried about him. I've done a horrible thing, and now Daniel's paying the price. The king can't sleep. First thing in the morning, the king runs down to the lion's den, and it says, the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Then Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. Daniel again is giving praise to God. My God has sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, that they have not hurt me, for as much as before him innocency was found of me, and then before thee, O king, I done no hurt. And here in the verse 23, it says, so Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Daniel had faith in God from the very beginning, from when he was first taken into captivity. Daniel had faith in his God. Daniel understood the position he was put in was not by his doing, but it was by God's doing. The situation we're at in America, that we will be put into America, is not going to catch God by surprise, people. God is not surprised. He knows what's happening. Hey, we know what's happening. It's already said in the back of the book. We have hope, people. We have faith. We have something that we can grasp onto. Even if they were to take our Bibles away, which they're not, if we've hidden God's word in our heart, we always have the Bible with us anyway. There is hope. It's our attitude. It's our attitude that will determine how God can use us. And verse 20 it says, so this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, the king of Syria, in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So in this, Daniel prospered. Why? It's his attitude. It's our attitude, people, that will determine how God can use us. Again, I'm sorry, went way longer than I expected. But man, our attitude is key, people. Our attitude is the key that unlocks God's blessings. If we have a poor attitude, God can't bless us. Regardless of what happens with the election and politicians in the House, the Senate, it doesn't matter. We did our part. Now we don't stop. Regardless who is in office, that president still needs our prayers. That president still needs our support. Because again, we are Americans. We stand together. It's what we do as Americans. That's what makes America great. That's what makes us different from every other country in the world. Because we stand together. Attitude is everything. Thank you, preacher.
All right. I hope you're still with me as Timmy broke Book of Daniel down chapter by chapter and verse by verse, and had some energy there in him tonight. And thank you again for tuning in. I want to wish everyone a happy Veterans Day. Remember this before we sign off. All it takes for freedom to be taken away from us is for a few good men to do nothing. Freedom is only one generation away from becoming extinct, the great Ronald Reagan said. And I appreciate all those that have fought for our freedoms, all those that still are. And that's what we need to be doing as Christians. As David said, is there not a cause? We know that Paul fought for the truce when he said, I fought a good fight, I finished my course. And Paul fought for what he believed in. And I pray that you will join me and keep on praying for our president. And I pray for President Trump. He's fought for our freedoms for 4 years and been attacked, and on and on and on. I appreciate you joining with me and praying for him. And that God is sovereign. He's in control. And I pray that you'll join with me in praying for him, for our president. Thank you for tuning in tonight. And join us again Sunday morning if you would. If you can't make it here, join us. We'll be live streaming. And for those of you that are able to and willing, join us back here in the auditorium Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. All right, this is your pastor, Rodney Noblet, rounding third, heading for home. See you Sunday morning. So long, everybody.